Hey guys, and welcome to probably my longest fanfiction that I've ever done in the last 7.5 years of making videos. As you guys know, I started the channel with making fanfictions and covering the comics with voices and sound effects, and in this one, we're going right back to the basics. This is a fanfiction that I've actually never done, and I'm taking a completely different spin on it. So I hope you sit back, enjoy, and before you do, please hit that like button as it greatly supports the channel and encourages me to make extremely long fanfictions like this. I'm sending this one to my sound engineer, as well as I will also have it edited with each frame and image to be custom made by a Photoshop artist in the future, so stay tuned for that, as well as I would love to have it animated. In the meantime, please enjoy this fanfiction of what if Luke was frozen in Carbonite in The Empire Strikes Back. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke cut his training short with Yoda to fight Darth Vader on Cloud City. This was ill-advised from Yoda and Obi-Wan, who cautioned him against this decision to save Han and Leia. However, Luke, being the son of Skywalker, decided to go ahead anyways despite not completing his training. During the duel, Vader's whole plan was to freeze Luke in Carbonite and deliver him to the Emperor. Now in this story, we can take the fanfiction in two separate areas. One is Luke is frozen and taken to the Emperor, and the other is Luke is frozen and trained by Darth Vader. Now I've done one in the past where Luke decides to join Vader when he tells him he's his father.
I am your father.
In which Vader trains him in secret. Now in this one, I'd like to take the spin of Vader delivering him to the Emperor.
Good.
So, let's begin.
All too easy.
As Luke falls into the cryogenic chamber, Vader uses the Force to activate it, sending a jet of freezing carbonite over Luke's body, encapsulating him just as it had Han a few moments before. Vader uses the Force to lift frozen Luke out of the chamber and activates its anti-gravity setting, as Vader heads to his ship with Luke and blasts off to the Emperor, ending the film. Now obviously here in this fanfiction, we're going to continue, and we got a long ways to go. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button or vote this episode on Spotify and iTunes. Arriving to the Emperor's secret location off-grid, he departs from his ship as he walks down the reclining shaft, ready to deliver the boy to his master. As his heavy boots echo through the long stone stairway to the Emperor's hidden throne room, he walks as the two royal red guards move aside as the doors slide open. The Emperor sat facing the view of this odd world atop his illustrious chair, his frog-like voice crackling through the chamber.
Lord Vader, you succeeded.
Yes, my master.
The Emperor turned around on his chair to face Vader, who now stood before him, Luke frozen in carbonite behind him, floating in place. Vader stood like a statue awaiting his master's orders.
And did you reveal to him the truth?
No, my master.
Good. Then the boy still thinks you killed his father.
Palpatine rose from his chair, only to use his cane to hobble towards Luke, running his wrinkled, bony fingers along the edges of carbonite, closing his eyes and tilting his head to the sky as if sensing the Force. The sides of his lips curled. This was the one, he thought. He knew Anakin had failed, and the man before him was merely a shell of what could have been, of what once was. The son of Skywalker. He was the new hope.
Release him, Lord Vader.
Vader pressed a combination of buttons and had Luke's carbonite freezing process reversed. As Luke fell out of the mold, he curled on the floor, unable to see. Now, his injuries here, of course, from the freezing process, would be eliminated much faster than Han's, who was in carbonite for over a year. Not to mention, Luke had the Force.
Leave us, Lord Vader.
Vader hesitated, and the Emperor noticed. Finally, turning on his boot's heel, he walked away. Through the door and past the royal red guards, his steps could be heard echoing down the hall. The Emperor observed Luke as he lay there, mouthing something. Leia. Luke passed out from the freezing temperatures. The Emperor looked down at him like a weak child who had been coddled by the light side. If only he had already embraced the darkness. He'd use his pain of the cold to fuel his powers. Such a pity, he thought. Extending his bony index finger, he shot a bolt of lightning at Luke to awaken him, jump-starting Luke's heart. The boy's eyes darted open, gasping for air. As he looked around to see a little cloaked figure with his back to him. Master Yoda? Luke paused. No, something was wrong. This felt different. It wasn't just cold physically, but spiritually as well. It's as if the Force and all warmth was taken. The very life of the planet itself was all being absorbed into this one being before him, malevolently. "Who are you? Where is Vader?" said Luke. The Emperor's heavy voice broke the silence, almost reverting to his Palpatine methods of brainwashing.
"Welcome, young Skywalker."
The very sentence brought rage and hope to Sidious. All the years that he put into Anakin, only to have them washed by the boy's arrogance and failure. The Force had gifted him another chance. It was always in his favor. Palpatine turned, only to see Luke's confused face turn to horror as he laid eyes on Palpatine's disfigured skin and glowing eyes. "Who are you?" Luke reached for his belt, hoping to find his weapon.
"You will call me Master."
Palpatine outstretched his hands with a cold embrace. Luke looked around. "No! Ben! Ben, where are you?" Sidious's smile faded.
"Your pitiful Obi-Wan cannot appear here. The dark side is too strong for him."
Luke backed away when the Emperor used the Force to choke him into the air, shocking him into obedience, just like he did Darth Maul all those years ago. The memory brought a smile to his face, enjoying it. Luke was released, falling to the floor as he tried to use the Force to throw an object at Sidious, who threw Luke's hands behind his back and lifted his chin to look up at his new master, binding him with the dark side of the Force, a power Luke had never felt so strong.
"You will learn to be my apprentice. In time, you shall adopt the ways of the dark side and abandon all you have learned from the feeble Jedi."
Luke couldn't speak. The Emperor's eyes closed, seeing Luke's thoughts.
"Oh, you think they will help you, don't you? Then I should tell you what you don't know. I defeated your pitiful Yoda. And as for Kenobi, we remember that death too, don't we?"
Luke's eyes began to overflow with tears streaming down his cheeks, unable to move. The Emperor shot Luke with more lightning as Skywalker screamed in agony. Vader stood at the foot of the stairs, hearing the echoes of Luke's cries. As the days passed, Luke began to use the Force in ways the Emperor taught him. Well, forced him through the darkness itself. He would do this easily by invoking fear into Luke, through means of reminding him of his friends that would be killed, Obi-Wan who died, his father that was murdered, Anakin Skywalker, who was taken from him by Vader. Luke's anger against the Emperor would be used as a tool to tap into the dark side. Eventually, Luke would know only that: fear, anger, hatred, and how to use it to defeat his enemies. Well, the enemies Sidious would put before him. Whether it were monsters from the planet like massive Rancor-type beasts, assassin droids, or bounty hunters that Sidious would indeed hire to kill Luke, playing man in the middle once again, just like the Clone Wars. Vader would be summoned to the Emperor's quarters. Palpatine knew his apprentice grew curious of his son's training.
Yes, my master.
"Lord Vader, your thoughts dwell on the training of young Skywalker. Proceed."
I...
Vader stuttered. Why did the Emperor have to be so good at sensing his feelings?
I wish to know if the boy is adequate.
"He has much to learn, like you once did, my apprentice. But he will soon learn our ways or be destroyed in the process."
Is he to join us?
"No, my apprentice. He is to replace you. That is, if you are not worthy. There can only be two. And in the end, the winner shall prevail by my side."
Vader's anger grew. Anger not for being replaced, but that his son was being twisted to the dark side only to destroy him. The Emperor surely was a special kind of evil, he thought.
"Is that a problem, Lord Vader?"
No, my master. You will defeat me or die.
Good. Now, go back to Vun and relish over your old master's weapon that you hold so dear at your fortress.
Yes, master.
Vader turned to exit when the Emperor called his name. stopping him when his back turned to the Dark Sith Lord.
You are never to speak to Skywalker. Understood?
Vader continued to walk and left as he said,
Yes, Master.
Palpatine's eyes glowed as he stared where Vader had just stood.
Conflict,
he sensed. Anakin Skywalker was not fully diminished. He sneered and turned back towards the window, plotting. Sidious spent his days much like Commodus, watching his gladiators fight to the death. As he would starve and beat Luke to the point of exhaustion, he knew what the Skywalkers were capable of, and pushed the boundaries tenfold with Luke as a form of punishment for Vader's early failure. As months passed and the rebellion grew weaker without the help of Luke and Han, who still remained frozen in Carbonite as decoration on Jabba's wall at his palace on Tatooine, Luke grew more powerful in the dark side. The moment arrived where Palpatine began to teach Luke what Vader could never achieve: Force lightning. As they stood atop the gray canyon on the planet, the wind billowing Palpatine's cloak, Skywalker, deep dark circles under his bloodshot eyes, remained steady and alert like a deranged dog. It had been 4 months since his capture, and Sidious was relentless. Speaking from the side of his mouth, the Emperor said through the howling of the wind,
Let me tell you of a tale of my master before me. I was not much younger than you are now, as we stood amidst a field when he explained to me the true abilities only the dark side could achieve.
Luke peered into nothingness, his soul nowhere to be seen through his lifeless eyes. Still, somewhere, though, a glimmer of him remained. Through the exhaustion and the torment, this gray planet, with its many rocks and boulders, reflected the jagged coarseness of Palpatine's nature. Raising his finger to which Luke's brow twinged, the boy knew what was to come. Lightning. Pure Sith lightning. Unabated. Luke fell to the floor, gasping for air as his clothes began to smolder.
The power of the dark side is like nothing else, young Skywalker. The Jedi only cover one side of it, but to leave the other in darkness, ironically enough, is foolish.
Luke stood, only to look at the Emperor. Then why do the Jedi refrain from such powers if they can be used to help them?
They fear it, my young apprentice.
Vader's ship flew overhead as he landed far away atop the structure of Palpatine's palace. Sidious remained focused as Luke looked back to see Vader's ship. It was the first time that he saw and felt Vader since Bespin, many, many moons ago. Sidious felt Luke's heart rate rise and his anger swell. This is why he summoned Vader at this precise moment.
Good. Good. Focus your rage on that boulder down there.
Sidious pointed towards a massive boulder, the size of a reek, down on the surface of the large crater they overlooked.
You will imagine everything you hate, all your fears and anger, into one emotion of rage. Harness the force from all around you. See it moving to the ends of your fingertips like reaching a lens, and unleash your hatred upon it.
Luke extended his finger and produced a flimsy spark that shot out into the dark sky. The Emperor was annoyed. He shot Luke with another blast of pure force lightning, releasing it and observing the tendrils coursing through Luke's body, still as if they were alive. Luke extended his finger again, but failed. The Emperor once again shot Luke with lightning.
You cannot expel true Sith lightning unless you have been hit with it from a Sith Lord. That is how your father died.
Luke yelled into the night sky and raised his hand as he remained knelt on the dirt ground, shooting a massive orb unlike anything Palpatine had seen before, straight at the boulder, shattering it into a billion tiny fragments, hurling in all directions. Sidious used the Force to crush any that intended to harm them. He was shocked. He had never seen something like that before.
Come, young Skywalker. Training for today has only just begun.
Vader, from his silent observatory, could feel the immense dark energy emanating from Luke. The boy who had once radiated hope and determination now seeped darkness and power. It was a transformation Vader understood all too well, but witnessing it in his own flesh and blood twisted his heart with a pain that he had not felt in years. His own destiny was a tragic tale of loss and corruption, but watching Luke follow the same path was unbearable. Meanwhile, as Luke's training intensified, he became adept at harnessing the dark side's energies. His skills and manipulation of the Force grew exponentially, and with each passing day he became less of Luke and more of a dark instrument of the Emperor's will. The boy who had once rushed into the battle to save his friends now harbored a growing resentment and hatred, fueled by Sidious's manipulative whispers and brutal training regimes. Vader, a mere observer for so long, realized the time was approaching for him to make a choice. His loyalty to Sidious was unyielding, yes, but the sight of his son being twisted into a dark weapon was more than he could bear. It began to claw at him and break away the hard exterior that became Darth Vader. He began to contemplate an unthinkable betrayal, one that would either save his son or end them both. As the second Death Star neared completion, the Emperor devised the final test for Luke. He would confront his friends, who thought Luke to be dead at this point, cornering the leaders of the rebellion in a trap that would not only crush the Rebel Alliance but also solidify Luke's place by Sidious's side. The Emperor's cruel plan was to have Luke lead an assault on the Rebel base, offering him a choice between his past and his dark future. Luke, now more machine than man in his emotions and loyalty, prepared for the assault. His eyes, once bright with hope, now burned with a sinister glow. He donned a new armor, reminiscent of his father's, only better, symbolizing his fall from grace. The Emperor watched with glee, believing his new apprentice ready to eclipse Vader in power and cruelty. As the fateful day arrived, the Rebel Alliance, unaware of the looming betrayal, prepared for a massive strike against the Empire in space over Endor's moon. Little did they know that they were walking into a trap that would not only test their resolve, but also decide the fate of the galaxy. Vader, torn between his loyalty and his love for his son, had to make a choice. As the fleets gathered and the battle was about to commence both in the skies and on ground, Vader went to Luke. Vader approached Luke in the dimly lit chamber where the young Skywalker was focusing his rage before the battle, the inverse of a Jedi's meditation, surrounded by the dark energies that he'd been taught to harness. The sight of his son, so engulfed in darkness, in hatred, reignited the conflict Vader had been suppressing for years. His steps echoed ominously as he neared, holding his loud breath. The doors slid open. Luke's eyes darted, their once blue hue now a smoldering red.
Luke.
Vader's voice was a mix of power and a strange, unfamiliar tenderness. He rose, facing the man he knew was his father's killer but felt nothing towards, at least on the surface. Yes, his voice was cold, stripped of the warmth and curiosity that it once held.
We are about to engage the rebellion,
Vader stated, obviously coming to Luke behind the Emperor's back, the mechanical rasp of his voice unable to hide the underlying emotion.
It is time to make a choice.
Luke sneered. The choice has been made. The dark side is my ally. The servos pulled in Vader's mechanical hand as it clenched. He had hoped, foolishly, for a different answer.
Luke, the dark side leads to a path you do not know. I can show you the truth of it all.
And what would you know of my path? Luke's voice rose. You who have walked it without hesitation? Vader felt the sting of truth in Luke's words.
And I have seen where it ends. Alone, in darkness, with nothing but regret. A pawn in the Emperor's hands.
Luke turned away, his cloak swirling around him. I have no use for your regrets. The Emperor has shown me the true power of the Force, of my potential. The chamber shook as the fleet prepared for battle, a grim reminder of what was at stake. Vader knew that his next words might be his last chance.
Luke, I once stood where you are now. I made my choice, and it cost me everything. Do not make my same mistake. You still have a chance to choose a different path, but only if you join me.
Luke's gaze met Vader's, a flicker of the boy that he once was passing through his eyes. It was a moment of vulnerability, quickly masked by the dark side's influence.
Luke, come with me. It is not too late.
The chamber fell silent as Luke, standing on the precipice of his destiny, made his choice. The battle raged on outside, but within the chamber, the real victory was at hand. Luke turned to face Vader. "You killed my father."
No, I am your father.
Luke stepped back, shaking his head. "You are not my father," Luke said in disbelief.
Search your feelings, you know it be true. The Emperor will use you as he used me before I became half of what I once was. He promised me power only to keep it from me, to do his bidding. I am what you will become.
Luke stood in shock as two officers entered and bowed to Lord Vader, telling them, "My lord, the Emperor summons you to his quarters while Lord Skywalker head down to the fourth moon." Vader choked both officers with the Force, breaking their necks.
Come with me, Luke. It is not too late. Together, we can destroy the Emperor and end this conflict.
The Emperor smiled from within his throne room. His plan was working as the Force told him it would. Facing the onslaught from his Star Destroyer, the doors slid open as Vader and Luke walked through. The Emperor cackled under his breath.
My apprentice, have you come to take your rightful place at my side?
"You lied to me. He is my father, isn't he?" Sidious knew Vader would end up breaking and telling his son the truth. All according to plan. Stupid Anakin Skywalker lived. Palpatine looked at them both.
He was.
Firing bolt after bolt of lightning at Vader, dropping the Dark Lord to his knees. Luke looked on as his father smoldered and breathed hard out of his respirator, the ground shaking and trembling as Vader's power and hatred for his master boiled, just as his leather skin blistered beneath his suit, which was designed to conduct lightning, a failsafe Palpatine had implemented to keep Vader obedient. Vader reached out with his mechanical hand, which was now bare, his glove melting off, as he sent Sidious flying backwards. Vader breathed into his own mask as he wheezed, dying, his mask half disfigured much like Palpatine's face from Mace Windu's lightsaber. Vader hacked and coughed. Ripping his mask apart with his free hand that wasn't holding his weight on the floor, Luke looked at his father's eyes as they locked.
Luke, don't trust.
Vader went flying back into the wall as Sidious walked forwards, cackling, throwing his cane at Vader and keeping it under his neck, in place with the Force, holding Vader above the ground, pinned to the wall. Turning his gaze to Luke, his hood sweeping over half of his face, the Emperor spoke to his new apprentice.
"Now, son of Skywalker, heir to my throne, kneel."
Luke hesitated. He reached within and summoned Vader's lightsaber to his hand, igniting his blue one as well, both of his father's weapons now coming for Sidious, who merely stood in place, unwavering and unfazed, as he froze both blades. Luke was no match for this power. Disgust on his face, the Emperor sneered.
"So be it, young fool."
Shocking Luke with a powerful amount of lightning, submitting the young Skywalker to the floor.
"You, like your father, are now mine." And soon I will have the third Skywalker at my side.
Luke and Vader looked confused and in shock.
"Oh, yes. Your sister."
The Emperor turned to face Vader, who remained pinned on the wall.
"I sensed the powers of two Skywalkers within Padme all those years ago. Do not ever underestimate the powers of the dark side, my feeble apprentice. I have been far ahead of you both for quite some time, waiting for my moment, for this very moment. Your friends will die, and she will become more powerful than either of you."
As the Emperor finished his sentence as if on beat, The second Death Star flashed out of hyperspace, knocking out several massive Mon Cala ships, which were obliterated as all Rebel fighters began to explode from locked-on turret systems and TIE fighters being spawned from the space station. Distinct explosions and the roars of battle could be faintly heard from within the Emperor's chamber. He walked over to Luke.
Such a pity how powerful you could have become. It would seem these Skywalkers are destined to never see their true potential. The Force has gifted me with another, the lost hope.
The Emperor pushed the cane into Vader's neck, voiding him of any air as he struggled to survive much longer. Luke stood behind Sidious, his eyes one blue, one orange, perfect balance of the light and dark. Purity. All of the Force swirled within him. His lightsaber flickered purple and red as he sent a massive orb of lightning towards Sidious, who quickly turned to fire a flurry of lightning tendrils from each of his 10 fingertips. The two battled as Sidious gained the upper hand, creating a massive dark aura around them, making it impossible for Luke to see. Vader dropped to the floor as Sidious focused intently on his battle with his son, gasping for air and constantly being shocked by his malfunctioning chest plate. He knew what must be done. He grabbed it and ripped it from his suit, the wires dangling from beneath his chest. Anakin yelled in pain as his eyes went from blue to a deep red.
The Force shall sustain me,
he whispered under his breath. Struggling to his feet, he used his cybernetics to his advantage and clunked up the stairs to the Emperor, who moved in closer to Luke through this dark aura that he had manifested. Vader knew this power. He had seen his master use it before, a few times in battle, only when he was caught off guard, which happened very rarely. It allowed him to blind and confuse his foe, only to get the jump on them and destroy them. He would not let this happen to his son. Vader entered the dark vortex of haze, sight and sound disoriented in this realm, as if he were in another place. The weight of the gravity itself so undeniably heavy. As Luke tried to see the Emperor, all he could make out was black and purple swirls of darkness, combined with a howling that pierced his ears. Worse than the storms that they would get on Tatooine as a kid. Luke remembered shooting womp rats in his T-16. Sometimes they'd move so fast that he would have to close his eyes and guess where they were. Yes, he thought, he would do just that right now.
Feel, don't think.
Wait, that wasn't his voice. Luke's eyes were closed. Not that it would help anyways if they were open, but he could feel amidst the coldness of this power, some warmth flickered, like a candle in a freezer. Not much different, but the contrast was definitely undeniable. That voice! He had never heard it before. Who was it? Vader navigated through the dark, swirling fog as he covered his face from the piercing winds, like sharp daggers into his skin. Blue auras shape-shifted around him, his cape pulling him into the inertia of the whirlwind. As he stood, centered as he could, the power of the Emperor was truly terrifying. His rage was unlike any other, and to think Anakin Skywalker would have rivaled this in his sleep had he not fallen to Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan, Vader thought, as he felt his old master's hand on his left shoulder. Turning to look, it was as if a blue manifestation of what could be seen as maybe Obi-Wan through this black, thick haze of evil, only to disappear and reappear when he looked forwards and saw a little blue Yoda in front of him. The tiny Jedi Master just stood there, unbothered in his haze, his voice somewhat reverberating through the winds that Palpatine caused.
Oh, Skywalker, missed you we did.
Anakin felt like he was dreaming. Had he closed himself off to the light side of the Force for that long? Is this what was happening? He was now open to its gates? Him and his former master shared maybe 1/10 of a second together, but it felt like a little bit longer. Yoda and Obi-Wan vanished, and it was all Vader needed. They were there with him now. He pushed through, only to find the Emperor's movements within the haze. He locked on. The shadow was on the move. and Vader knew where he was headed, right behind him. Luke would never see him if the Emperor killed him. It would soon all be over. Sidious would take Vader and then move behind Luke to incinerate him. Vader's timing was impeccable. Even through the haze, he closed his eyes and felt the movements. Sidious was fast, but not fast enough. The Force guided him and his premonitions. His Jedi reflexes were extremely attuned to the Force, as Qui-Gon had mentioned long ago. As if a heavy weight had been lifted from his body, he was now able to truly use the Force, unabated by hatred, but fueled by love. Love for Luke, for Padme, for his daughter, and most of all, for himself. Quickly, he reached out with his hand, asking the Force for his lightsaber off of the floor, and the Force answered. Anakin Skywalker's blue lightsaber flew to his hand as he pointed the emitter to his chest and ignited it. Hot blue plasma piercing his heart as Sidious's head was impaled behind him. Vader sacrificed himself. The dark aura of the Emperor faded out of existence, and Luke watched in shock as his father stood there with his lightsaber through his heart and the Emperor behind him, a smile on his face as he watched his son. As Luke ran to grab hold of his father, Vader faded away into ash. It would seem Sidious hit Anakin with death's touch right as he died. This was Palpatine's finishing move, his most devastating move. The Emperor's bony finger pointed right at the back of Vader's skull. The death touch, one precise spark of the most powerful dark side lightning, and the victim would cease to exist, being reduced to floating ash. It would seem Sidious hit Anakin with death's touch right as he died. Anakin Skywalker disintegrated into vapor. As Sidious hit the floor, a hole where his face should have been. Luke dropped to his knees, holding the few ashes of his father in his fingertips.
Your friends, my son. Save them.
Anakin's voice appeared to Luke, who looked up and then outside the window as the Death Star prepared to fire on Endor's moon. Luke walked close to the window, closed his eyes, and summoned all aspects of the Force from every corner of the galaxy that he could. Light, dark, it didn't matter. It would now bend to his will, and he would bend to its. He used the Force to break apart the focusing lens on the battle station that fired the lasers, allowing the Force to surge through him as he pulled the Star Destroyer that he was on towards the second Death Star. Boarding a TIE fighter, he blasted off to it as he had shortened the distance, making for lost time. Flying at top speeds and jumping out of the cockpit mid-air, rolling to the ground and lighting both Vader and Anakin's lightsabers as the TIE exploded into the officer's observatory in the hangar bay. Luke deflected blasts and attacks from stormtroopers, using the Force to slam some of them into the walls, break some of their bones, throw lightsabers around him like Yondu's arrow, and wreak havoc on every Imperial at the battle station. Making his way to the reactor core, he broke the necks of all the royal guards standing outside, as he threw several thermal detonators down the shaft where the reactor core exploded. The second Death Star was about to go down, finally. Luke got into a TIE fighter and headed down to Endor's moon, knowing his friends were there at the Rebel station. As he landed, Rebel troops all approached the TIE fighter with blasters at the ready, until he stepped out. Leia in disbelief as she ran to meet him, his cape swaying as he walked, one lightsaber on each hip. "Where's Han?" Chewbacca let out a big roar as he greeted Luke, where C-3PO and R2 were chattering like crazy. Leia looked sad. "Where's Han?" As Han Solo appeared from the crowd, limping towards Luke. "Kid, I got a crazy story to tell you." That night, they all celebrated with the Ewoks, and Luke would go on to tell them of everything that happened and how Han escaped with the help of Lando from Jabba's palace. His newfound abilities guiding him to bring together a new collective of Force sensitives in the galaxy. To not be trained as Jedi or Sith, but to learn the Force and let it guide them for good. Luke's philosophy was to let his students use all forms of the Force, and not to let powers to dictate his control over himself in the light or dark, but rather his conviction and control over himself, which was the true way of a Force user, balance. Luke would go on to train the galaxy's finest Force users, until one naturally would become fascinated by the ways of the Sith. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this fanfiction. This is truly the longest one that I have on the channel here, and just one full part. I hope you really liked it. I really enjoyed writing it. It took me hours, and as you guys know, I'm not the best with coming up with endings, but I'm actually pretty happy with this one. I think it's pretty cool. There's a lot of action in there, and I can only imagine what it would actually look like if it were animated or live action, which would be amazing. As you know, those projects do take a lot of time, and I would love to animate this one if you so wish. So let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see that. Also, support by hitting the like button, or check out my merch, where you can support the channel and all the animation projects, including Vader Episode 2, which is now in full production, ready to be released later this year if all continues as planned. Check out my sabers at theorysabers.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Star Wars Theory and Twitter, or X, at RealSWTheory. If you'd like to check out my fanfiction channel, which is all fanfictions just like this one but not Star Wars, it's called Theories Tales. Thanks so much for watching today, everyone. I will catch you in the next one. Until then, remember, my fellow Jedi and Sith friends, the Force will be with you always.